And now, two guys who survived eating paste as kids, Aaron and Jonathan.
Howdy, and welcome to episode 54 of In the Rabbit Hole's Urban Survival Podcast. In this episode, we tame our inner gun nut with logic and reason. We're your hosts, Aaron
and Jonathan.
And you are in the rabbit hole, safe and sound. Today's show is sponsored by Cat's Coffee. If you're looking for truly exceptional coffee to help you survive the morning or the next zombie apocalypse, you need to be drinking Cat's. They specialize in the finest coffee from sources that prioritize environmental responsibility and are fair trade certified. Their goal is to achieve perfection in every cup. Check them out at Katz, K-A-T-Z as in zebra, coffee.com. Or click on their bright green banner on the site and make sure you're dealing with an official sponsor of the show. Again, that's Katz, K-A-T-Z as in zebra, coffee.com. All right, so here we are, episode 54, and we haven't talked about guns in almost a year. And that's,
no, it's been a long time.
Which is very much unlike us.
Yes. Well, I mean, we talk about guns all the time.
Yeah, that's true.
We just haven't talked to y'all about
Yes.
guns in a while.
Yeah, I think it has actually been almost a year. So here we go. And we've done a couple other episodes on guns, and we've had guests on to talk about guns. And today I think we're going to take it, a lot of the information will be similar, but we're going to take it in a different direction, and a more practical direction in general. Yeah,
I think we're going to share some experiences we had.
Yeah.
I think that's, we've been through this. We've done the whole process, learned from it. It's not painful, it's fun, but it's definitely one in which there were a lot of lessons to be learned. But just going back to the old shows, if you're going through the website, just do a search.
We'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, we'll put some stuff. But, we had Dan, who's a firearms trainer, and we had Robert, who's a firearm sales guy. So we've got lots of experience throughout some of the past shows. We're not going to cover the topics they did. We are going to take this in a slightly different direction.
Yeah, today's show is more going to be about a battery of guns, a basic selection, and in part, some of the stories we're going to tell are to illustrate some of the really, I'm not going to say really dumb firearms purchase decisions we've made.
Hey, I'm going to admit it. We both like firearms.
Yeah,
we
quite a
enjoy
bit.
firearms. We like shooting them. It's fun. We go to the range. We'll spend an entire day at the range. We've even joked about we're going to have to pack a lunch kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And that way we get more range time so we don't have to leave for lunch and then come back. That's how crazy we'll get about just enjoying the time, because I find it relaxing. I know you do too.
Oh, it's extremely relaxing.
So there are firearms both of us own that are not what either one of us would say are practical.
No.
Okay, and that's, I think, what we're going to really talk about here a little bit more is that practical concept versus, do I want to buy the thing that's the coolest? And maybe you do. I mean, maybe you have the disposable income to say, I'm going to buy the cool one and the practical one. I know we've both been through those periods where we decide to do that and other times where we decide not to. Those are choices you make. I mean, those are all trade-offs and everything else. But, before we even get to that, let's just start with some basics. Let's lead in. I don't want people jumping out and going, oh, firearms, without thinking about, before you even think about firearms, think about instruction. I mean, I think you at the very basic, you need some, go find a good instructor and get some basic instruction.
Yeah, I think at minimum, my kind of personal recommendation for people is to always spend double on training, at the very minimum, double on training what you do on your firearm.
Yeah, and I think both of us will agree it's not easy to find a great firearms instructor. But once you do, utilize that resource. I mean,
absolutely.
And not a family member, by the way. It's okay to go shooting with family members and have them show you a couple of tricks and how to do things and maybe get you that next step. But family members instructing other family members how to shoot. I mean, if you're a dad and you want to teach your son, do it. But always
Yeah.
bring in, it's always good to bring in someone else because it's so easy to just look at a family member and say, you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, that is so easy. And I think in general, unless the family member that's really is what they do for a living. But even then, it doesn't matter. I've run into that before.
And most of the people who know what they're doing will say, I don't train family members.
Yes, yeah. And I will definitely agree with that. And I think the only instance where it really makes sense is if you really are strapped for cash, that could be a good place to start is getting instruction first. So I didn't want to completely dismiss it.
And if you're strapped for cash, there are organizations that are not my favorite ones, although I appreciate what they do for firearms ownership. And when I say they're not my favorite ones, I love that they're out there lobbying for us. They also offer training, and it's their training that I find sometimes a little bit lacking. But if you are under financial pressure, then they offer really affordable training to the masses.
Are you talking about the NRA?
The NRA, yeah.
Yeah, they do. And I will agree. I'm not wild about the... I've sat through several of their courses. It's a great place to start. I've sat through several of their courses, and I just... my issue with their training is they seem more concerned about how many patches can you get on your jacket.
Right. And it tends to be a little more academic than practical. We've talked a million times about Appleseed. I'll stress it again. Appleseed is great. Appleseed focuses on riflery. Now, any skills you learn in riflery are easily translated into your handgun.
Absolutely. I think the learning proper trigger control and sight alignment, no matter how much training I went through previously, and I mean, even with Dan, and Dan was an absolutely wonderful instructor. There was something about spending, the first time I went through Appleseed I went through their full boot camp, but there really was something really spending that time just focused on those concepts of what is trigger control and what is sight alignment and what is proper sight alignment.
And I'm just going to throw this out there now. Everybody has heard throughout, if you've shot before, or if you've dealt with people who have shot before, it's always, squeeze the trigger. Squeeze the trigger. Well, until you have an instructor really work with you and you can feel what that means, that doesn't mean anything. I mean, I will tell you, I've been shooting a long time, and I got to a point where I was beginning to squeeze a trigger versus pull a trigger and all that. But until you have someone really walk you through that and show you what that means so you can feel it, the word squeeze a trigger, really, it's kind of like, okay, I squeeze and pull. I mean, I'm pulling slowly. Is that squeezing? I don't know. I know now, and I'm not even going to try to describe it to you because it's not worth it. People have tried to describe it to both of us. It's even trigger control. Well, I have my finger on it, and I'm pulling it back. Is that control? Not really. Sight alignment. Okay, they're aligned, but how do you align them? How does it work? All that. All those things.
My favorite was being surprised by.
Oh, yeah.
And
you want to be surprised by the bullet going off. But not really.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
And these are all we're not really going to get into what does that stuff really mean today. That's not where we're going with this. It's just that is where the importance of getting instruction. And I think
good instruction.
Good instruction. And even trying a couple different instructors. One of the things we were talking about right before the show was that there was stuff that we got. There was really wonderful and the bulk of handgun information that we got from Dan, but that there was another instructor that we went out and tried too. And while we really, our entire group of friends hired the guy for an entire day of private instruction, I'm not going to say his name, but we really did not enjoy training with him. But there was one piece of information about how a handgun should fit your hand properly that I was like, okay, that right there was worth the class.
Oh, yeah, and that's
worth the cost.
That's another thing. The reason we're putting instruction up first is before you go out and spend the money on something, maybe it would be good, and there are a lot of places, by the way, that rent handguns. That's not just in Texas, that's throughout the country. There are a lot of instructors who will have handguns available to students. So if you get the option to try a handgun and see how something fits in your hand and understand how it should fit in your hand, that'll help you with selection later. Now, I know if you're listening to this show, there's a good chance. I know not all of you, because we've gotten emails and stuff like that telling us that some of you can't based on legal issues, legal issues based on location you live, things like that. But for those of you who don't have a handgun yet, go get instruction first. For those of you that do, go get instruction now. Understand what the best fit would be, and maybe you'll find there's a reason that you only kind of like your handgun, or you only carry it sometimes, or
Mm-hmm.
you don't shoot it as much as you want because you just not enjoyable. A lot of that really does come from the way it kind of fits your hand. It sounds kind of intuitive, like, oh, I can just go in and see how it fits, but it really doesn't work that way. You really have to understand the right grip.
There's a difference between fit and feel, and
Right.
a lot of, if you don't know how a handgun should properly fit your hand,
Yeah.
then all you're doing is saying, well, this feels better,
Yep.
that this gun feels better than this gun. And that part I think we can actually run through really quickly, which is that the handgun in your hand, the pad of your index finger should rest comfortably on the trigger in the trigger's resting state. If you can't, and at that point the front sights you should be able to draw an imaginary line from the front sight all the way up to your shoulder. It should be a perfectly straight line, just as if you were pointing your finger.
And that's where the whole idea of the
Natural point
of aim and all that thing, those concepts,
instinctive aims,
all come from the fact that it becomes an extension of your arm.
Mm-hmm. And if you cannot do that, and you have to have the gun sort of cocked to one side or the other, it doesn't fit, and it's not the right gun for you, no matter how cool it looks. Which kind of leads us into the next topic. That this is more of a general conversation about all guns in general, I think. And we've suffered from this, and I still suffer from it. I still look at guns and I'm like, oh, it's just cool. I just want it. I have no purpose for it or anything else.
I've got more than a couple.
Yeah,
like that.
Exactly. But I have more than a couple. That happens, I think, more often with handguns, perhaps. Well, maybe some people it happens a lot with rifles, too.
I think there are people who get, it's that whole black rifle disease concept and all that. Because I think we both know people who have Jason the Redneck Resource.
Mm-hmm.
Jason, right now, I don't know if he does have a rifle. Well, the 22.
He has the 22,
so that's the only one he's got. But when you talk to him about what he wants, I mean, Jason, and he's logical enough to know that the ones he wants are not necessarily the ones he's going to get. But if you go through his want list, I mean, he's got all kinds of crazy stuff on that list. I probably do too. I mean, I have this really strong, ridiculous desire these days to go get myself a 338 Lapua sniper rifle. There's absolutely, and Aaron's laughing. I'm laughing at myself because honestly, there is nothing I'm going to do with that. I'm not even going to take that rifle to the range.
No, you can't.
There are very few ranges around here, at least, that'll allow you to shoot anything based on the 50 cal, even a neck down 50 cal, like a 338, which starts the 50 cal cartridge and is neck down. But there aren't that many ranges that'll let you actually take those weapons out there. So it's kind of, I mean, I'll have it and I'll get to pet it on occasion and I'll get to go, this is really cool. But why would I go spend that kind of money on something like that? I'll drool over it. I'll look at pictures on it sometimes. But actually, the rifle that both of us have been drooling over lately is something much more practical.
It's all your fault. I had finally put it out of my head.
And it's a 30-30. And, I think both of us are looking at both the Winchester Model 94 and the Marlin 336. They're both great rifles. I do not want to get a ton of emails telling me, why you like one versus the other one. And this is not about a Winchester Marlin war. They are both great, fantastic rifles that have been around for a very long time. They've both proven themselves in the field for, over a century.
Mm-hmm.
So, but the point is, those are extremely practical rifles. They're good for deer anywhere. I mean, they are the ultimate in deer rifle. They're a great field rifle. They actually make a really good defensive rifle. There's actually SWAT teams that have picked them up for that very purpose.
They make a tactical black. I can't remember which manufacturer it is. Pardon me, but they do make a tactical black, which just bothers me.
Yeah, me too.
Anyway, not to get off on that, but I think that kind of brings us back to, that is, if you are making a firearms purchase for the first time, don't worry about what looks cool. Don't worry about what's impressive. And if you spend enough time at a gun store, and I know we've made a lot of jokes about this, but if you stand at a counter for more than a few minutes, you are going to hear a new shooter ask the clerk behind the counter, well, how accurate is this one versus that one? And it is, and this is one of those things, a concept I wish that I had gotten before I bought any guns,
Yep, same
which
here.
is that this kind of accuracy fallacy. All the instructors that we've ever worked with have always, or the really good ones, have always started off the same way. Your gun will outshoot you.
Right. There is no modern quality firearm, so made from a manufacturer that you know the name of well, for good reason, not bad, not some manufacturer you heard about because they make crap. But there is no quality firearm made today that is not accurate enough to perform the duty that it's designed for.
And probably beyond your own skill.
Exactly.
And I think we can get into the nuances here for a second about why you're choosing what you're choosing. If you're choosing something for competition,
right,
and you are a competitive shooter and you are at a level, that makes sense to me to worry about accuracy. If we're talking about self-defense, daily carry, home defense, it doesn't matter.
Well, so let's talk about that a little bit. For the purposes of the show, and I think in the concept of urban preparedness, and I don't think this actually changes whether it's urban or backwoods or suburban. I would say there's actually 4 types of firearms that people should try to put into their battery of weapons, whatever you might call it. But that would be, in my mind, a defensive handgun, a shotgun, some kind of high caliber rifle, and when I say high caliber, it's probably 30 caliber or above, and a 22 long rifle specifically. Most people say 22 and they know that, but I know we've got educated listeners out there who are thinking, you mean I need a 22 mag? No, just 22 long rifle is good enough. 22 mag's fun. I own one, love it, but 22 long rifle is really the way to go. And I think with those 4,
at those 4, you have a complete battery.
Yeah, you're good to go. And if you think about it in terms of where you live, so actually we'll get to that in a little bit. So let's start with handgun. If we think about handgun, I think a lot of people start going, and we did the same thing. I don't know if either one of us actually did this, but we know a lot of people who are like, oh, if it's not 45, it's nothing, or whatever it might be. Well, there are a lot of calibers out there that are extremely effective. Bullet technology is
it's amazing how far it's come.
Yeah.
And I think we were talking about this yesterday, and I think the best way to think about the calibers, don't worry too much about what caliber you're getting. Get the one that you shoot well.
Right.
And here's the basic idea. It doesn't feel good to get shot with anything.
Exactly. And any, what I'm going to call mid to large size caliber weapon, large being a 45, let's say mid being a 38, all of those have been effectively used for a very long time by either police forces, individuals to defend themselves. I mean, just across the board, militaries. So if you look at it, so I'm going to give just a personal example. I go back and forth between 2 carry weapons. I sometimes carry actually very often carry a small Smith & Wesson. It's an older Model 640, but it's a 38 special only. It's all stainless. I love that thing for carry because I have a pocket holster for it. I can pretty much carry it in anything and it stays concealed. I mean, nobody knows that I'm carrying when I've got it. It's fantastic. I use it with defensive bullets. They're plus P, 115 grain bullets. Well, the 38 caliber was used by police forces in this country for a very, very long time, and it has put down many a person in the commission of a crime. It's been used all over the world, and it's a fantastic gun. And for me, it works because it's something I can carry pretty much no matter what I'm wearing. Summertime in shorts, great in a pocket holster. Now, if it's a little cooler out and I'm wearing a little bit more clothing and I'm comfortable doing it, I will sometimes carry my other carry weapon of choice is a Browning high power, the 9mm. It holds 15 rounds versus the 5 that my Smith & Wesson holds. But honestly, that's another one of those things that's a big fallacy. How many rounds does it hold? Most gunfights will end in far less than the 6 rounds of revolver.
Yeah, I think it's the average gunfight is over in 3.
Yeah, so I mean, you don't have to worry about whether or not you've got 15 or 5 if you're just doing it for regular carry.
Scout from Appleseed had a really great, funny thing. We were teaching one day, and he was giving a quick lesson, and it was talking about accuracy
Mm-hmm.
and it was basically quality versus quantity. And he said, if you have a rhinoceros running at you, the rhinoceros doesn't care how many bullets whiz past its head.
Right.
It only cares about the one that hits it in the head.
Exactly. That's the whole thing. So my high power, the whole thing being that high power, it's a 9mm.
Yeah.
Now, Aaron knows that I happen to be a huge fan of the 1911 and
Yeah.
the 45. I cannot afford to shoot 45 regularly. I probably can. I choose not to afford.
It's not an expense that you want to pick up.
Exactly. The 45 has gotten very expensive as far as ammunition goes, and I just refuse to practice with it on a regular basis. That's why I don't carry it. I practice regularly with the 9mm, regularly with the 38. So those are the weapons I carry. If 45 got cheap all of a sudden, I'd probably carry. I have a really nice little compact 1911 that I would probably carry regularly.
Yeah.
That might actually become my primary carry weapon. But, it's just one of those things where the ammunition prices have gotten to a point where that has actually impacted what I'm willing to carry also. So there's a lot of factors that are going to impact this. But a good defensive handgun, don't skimp on something like this. This is an area where you want to go, all right, I'm going to go get the cheapest one. But you don't want to do that for any of the categories. Okay.
No, and I think conversely to that, you don't have to buy the most expensive one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You don't need to go out and get the fancy custom 1911 because somebody told you that 1911s are really cool. For most people, actually, a single action only weapon is not the way to go.
Yeah, and another quick story. My father carries a 45, and one day not too long ago, we were talking about it. And he was asking me why, because I carry a 357 SIG, and he was asking me why. And I said, I like the round, and I shoot well with it. I shoot well with several rounds, but that one in particular, I just really like the round.
Mm-hmm.
I like the way it shoots. It has nothing to do with its ballistics or anything else. I just like it.
Right.
And I asked him, how did you end up on a 1911 and a 45? And he said, well, my friend that was a competitive shooter told me that's what I had to have. That was the gun to have. So that's what I carried. Right. And I think a lot of people end up carrying a gun for that reason.
And a lot of people, especially in the U.S., I know we've got listeners all over, but especially in the U.S., everyone thinks to themselves the 1911 is the American handgun. And it is. You know what? It is a great handgun. There's nothing wrong with the 1911. I actually think that I shoot very well with the 1911, which is, side note, one of the reasons I like the Browning high power. It's, if you can think of it this way, it's kind of the evolution of that type of weapon. John Browning did both of them. The high power really is kind of the next step. Some people argue that. Again, don't send me emails. I'm not telling you one's better than the other. Just saying. I like them both. I love the 1911 a lot, but it has its issues. I mean, there are problems with the 1911 that other guns do better. And again, this goes back to go out, take some lessons, go rent a few guns, see how they feel in your hand. Because like Aaron, you and I have talked about this a few times. The 1911 just doesn't feel right in your hand.
Yeah, and I haven't spent a whole lot of time. It may just be that I need to actually spend more time shooting in it. But there's just something right out of the box. There's just something about it that just doesn't fit my hand well.
On the other hand, that high power I handed you.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, it's really well. Yep. And I ran into that also with, I was looking at a SIG 220 one day.
Yeah.
And it did not fit my hand well.
Yep.
However, an H&K 45, the H&K USP 45 fit my hand beautifully. And this goes back to, it has to fit your hand, not just be comfortable in your hand.
Exactly. So when you're making the handgun choice, there are a lot of, you will see certain guns and go, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen.
Yeah.
It may not be practical at all. I mean, there's size things you have to concern yourself with, your hand, the fit, the caliber. There's a lot of things to think about. But again, it's not going with what somebody else told you. It's something you've got to kind of decide on your own. I know, like I said, we both went through this. Also, if you are somebody who feels comfortable with a revolver, don't let anyone tell you that a semi-auto is the only way to go these days because you get more rounds. That's bull. It's true you get more rounds, but it is bull that it's the only way to go. Like I said, I carry a revolver regularly. When we're doing camping or hiking or anything, I actually carry a larger revolver. I've got a Smith & Wesson Model 629 with it's the UDC model. I love that thing. It's got a 2.5-inch barrel, 44 mag. You put full 44 loads in it, it is a pain in the ass to shoot, But if you put 44 special in there, it's very easy. And if you put a lighter 44 mag, not bad. And you can. I don't know if there's a lot in the area of the country we're in, at least, that it can't kill. I mean, it will defend you from pretty much anything out there.
Yeah. I think in a lot of cases it's overkill, but
most
it is, because I shot yours one day and I was like, this is awesome. Now there were some really heavy 44 rounds that you put in it that we were playing with, and it was like, okay, that's just miserable. That felt about like trying to shoot a 1 ounce slug out of a Riot 12 gauge with pistol grips on it. It was like, what is this?
Yeah, there was
no.
Those bullets were like, I think they were actually designed to take down brown bear, so grizzlies.
I think they were designed to make somebody feel more manly about themselves. Really, and I was just like, no, I don't like this.
Locomotive hunting and making yourself.
Yes.
I mean, I think we actually grew a little bit more facial and chest hair just shooting it.
That train had it coming. I'm telling you.
Yes, it did.
And I think it really does come down to personal preference. If you like revolvers, or if the way a revolver fits and feels in your hand is best for you, then
yeah.
And
or
as
if you're
far
just more comfortable
as
with it, like my father-in-law, for instance, is just not comfortable with the idea of having a semi-automatic. Just for some reason it bothers him. That's okay, you know.
Well, now there's an interesting segue too about the safety, the different safety features, because a lot of revolvers don't have any kind of physical, mechanical safety that locks the gun.
Mm-hmm. On the other hand, they are true double action.
Yeah.
So it's not like unless you physically cock the hammer back.
Yeah.
It's not in single action mode.
But the story I was going to tell was when I switched off I had a Smith & Wesson 4006 40 caliber, and that was my main everyday carry weapon. And I finally decided that it was a boat anchor. It was too damn heavy for everyday carry, and
it was.
Yeah, and I mean, I liked the gun. It wasn't the greatest in the world, and it had to have a little work done to clean up some issues that particular model had. But once I cleaned those issues up, it was a wonderful gun. It was just so heavy because it was a solid stainless steel gun. Well, had looked at SIGs for a very long time, but have never bought one because I was used to that 1911 mentality of having that manual safety, and SIGs not having a safety beyond the safety that is your brain.
Right, and the idea that it's double action.
And the idea that it is
the
double
first shot,
action. And it was very uncomfortable for me at first to make that switch. I did, because I made the leap and I switched over to a SIG 226 and sold my Smith & Wesson. But it took me a while to get used to it. And now I actually do not like manual safeties.
Yeah.
I don't see the point personally.
The only time I like it, and this goes back to its training too. Yeah, I like it my high power has to have it.
Well, yeah, on a 1911 on those 1911 style guns, they have to have it.
So that's any gun that's a single action only, like the 1911 or the Browning high power. You're going to need that manual safety. But yeah, I agree with you. When I carry my SIG, yes, I've also got a SIG. When I carry that one, I'm perfectly comfortable going. Although I will tell you, when I draw it, I do sweep the invisible, non-existent safety.
Oh, do you?
Yes. I mean, I just do now.
Yeah.
Not on my revolver. I guess it just feels different enough.
Yeah.
But on any semi-auto, I do actually. I've now gotten myself trained to the point where my thumb sweeps the safety, which is probably a good thing. I mean, it's just become a reaction.
Yeah.
So that safety comes down. But again, this all goes back to going back to training. Whatever you choose, you're going to need to practice, because with the handgun world, just like everything else, it's not useful if you can't get to it and use it.
And it is a diminishing skill. So if you don't practice on a regular basis, your skill level will diminish.
And we're all guilty of it. We all go where it's just been too long. You just need to get out there and force yourself to do it. And when you're out there, it's fun.
And we can talk about that topic for just a second of dry firing.
Yes.
And I think the myth is perpetuated by gun store clerks that don't know what they're talking about, in that dry firing a pistol does not do anything to the gun. And I can't tell you how many I've asked every gunsmith I meet. I asked them.
The only caveat.
Yeah.
If you have an old rimfire pistol.
There are caveats.
Do not dry fire.
Yeah.
Okay. And when I say rimfire, that includes your 22 long rifles, 22 mag, any of those older rim style. Most of them have corrected the problem now. Not all of them. So rimfire is a little different. You have to check the owner's manual on your rimfire. But for any center fire pistol, modern, again, this goes back to modern.
Yeah.
When you're talking about older center fire, you still have some issues with floating fire pins and stuff like that. But any modern pistol, be it a revolver, semi-auto, you should be just fine.
Yeah, exactly.
But the gun store guys will lie to you day in, day out.
It is amazing the amount of myths that are perpetuated in gun stores.
Yeah, by the people selling the guns. Those people selling you a gun are not necessarily experts just because they're behind the counter.
Yeah. They're just guys that have listened to more bad advice or bad information more often.
Right.
Now that's not to knock every, if we've got a listener out there that is a gun salesman or a gun store clerk that's like, well, I'm really good. That's awesome. But it more often than not, I find goofballs working behind the counter at gun stores.
Right.
Which kind of goes back to the comment I was making earlier about the new guy that walks in and says, well, is this one more accurate than this one? And I've never heard a clerk stop somebody and say, this one is more accurate than this one, but only if you put it in a bench rest and actually measure them. Out of your hand, you'll never see the difference.
Right.
But to go back to why I was talking about and getting irritated about dry firing does not doing anything.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
is that dry firing, it's not 100% as good as going to the range, but it's about 80 to 90% as good. If you are, now this is only true if you have gotten good instruction and you have gotten some good habits to practice.
Yeah, otherwise you're just reinforcing bad habits.
Yeah, that's no good. And so, but dry firing, getting, even if it makes you feel better, going back to the dry firing thing to get snap caps, and I will admit, I've got a whole bunch of snap caps, and I put them in there, but that's also because I'll practice clearing jams and stuff, and I like to have something in there to see something go flying out.
And I'll even admit it, I put it in my nicer guns, the
Mm-hmm.
ones that I really like and care about a little bit more.
Yeah.
And for the ones that are more what I call the utility guns, I don't put anything in them. So it's, unless I am practicing clearing jams or something like that. So even though I know it's not a problem,
yeah, it's kind of almost like a superstition.
Right. It becomes and if you have to deal with the superstition, just go buy the snap caps. Aren't that expensive for any of the normal calibers?
No, I think they're like $6 usually for a pack of 3 or something.
Now I will add one thing. So Aaron mentioned he carries a 357 SIG, and that is a great round. There's nothing wrong with it, and he has enough of it that it's enough of the round that it's not a problem for him during any short-term scenario. People are gonna ask, okay, what would you recommend as calibers to look at? If I were looking at a gun right now, the only calibers I'd really look at are what I'd call the standard calibers. And those are like 38, 9mm, 45, 44, 357, the 357 mag, not necessarily the 357 SIG. That's the exotic calibers I personally wouldn't look at, just because they become harder to find, especially when you deal with like ammo shortages like we had. I know you had a real hard time.
I had a really hard time because a lot of law enforcement has started carrying the 357 SIG. And so it was like those guys were getting it before me, and I wanted them to have it before me because I already had enough of it.
Right. And the only one we could really find, and even that was hard to find, was 9mm. I mean, 45 became a problem for a while. 40 became a problem. And 9 is the easiest one because they produce... Thing about it is, think about it. 9mm is produced for every military on the planet.
Yes.
They produce a whole lot of it. So there's always going to be some supply of it, and that's why it's a great round. You will also find things like 357 mag, 44 mag, and 38 special constantly, because there are so many of them out there that the manufacturers just produce a lot of ammunition for those guns. So
the 357 SIG has become... The production of it has become a lot better, especially because so many law enforcement agencies have picked it up as their round of choice.
It's cleared up a little bit. I mean, you're not seeing the ammo shortages you were, although we may see those again soon.
Yeah, but that is also regional, as long as we're talking about the ammo shortages. That is, I've found that when it does occur, a lot of it is regional. I've had friends that have text messaged me saying, or asking, are you having a problem with this caliber in your area? And I'm like, no, I can buy that all day long everywhere I go.
Yep.
And they're like, that's really weird because here in such and such state, there's none.
Right.
And so I think in part that's some of it's regional. And to kind of go on into this topic, since we're already there and talk about it for a minute, I know what was it? Was it in the 1 year anniversary show? Or maybe it was an episode before that when we kind of pontificated a little bit that we will likely see ammo shortages coming up again soon, and we're going to see ammo prices skyrocket
and
for
probably
a
gun
brief
prices
period.
again too.
Gun prices, people are going to get nuts about buying guns. I mean, that was the same thing when Obama came into office. Everybody said, "Oh shit, they're going to make all these guns illegal. I better go buy one." And people that had never shot didn't know what they were buying. And that's fine. And it was actually really interesting because then a lot of people went out and got training, which was great because we were hearing that from all of our friends that are in the business of training people. But I think we're going to see that again. But I don't know.
And if you notice the price of an AR, it literally doubled.
Oh, did it?
Well, no, back then.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, is it
expect
happening now?
Probably. They've come back almost back to where they started. I wouldn't doubt if they went back up to the super high prices again.
Oh, I'm sure.
In this summer. And again, that's one of those things where we both went out and we did get our ARs.
Yes.
We own ARs. We rarely shoot our ARs.
Because that goes back to ammo prices being so expensive. I practice with it. I practice dry firing with it.
Yeah, same here.
I practice dry firing with my FAL, but
But if I were going back and picking just one rifle, that wouldn't be the rifle I'd pick. I would not go get an AR. I'm actually saying this with all sincerity, going into the rifle discussion a little bit now. I would not go get probably any semi-auto rifle personally if I could just get one. I probably really would just go get that Marlin 336 or the Winchester 94. Yeah, I think so personally. Just thinking in terms of what I'd want it for. You can use a lever action fast enough. Most of those 30-30s hold 6 rounds.
Yeah.
No, that's not the 20 or 30 rounds that your AR is going to hold. But at the same time, this goes back to what are you practically going to use it for if you really did need it. So I think if I just had one rifle, it would be one of those. Especially thinking back to the 30 cal. Now your FAL is also a great rifle.
The FAL it is a pretty awesome. Now it is a beast to carry. Right. It is a big, heavy gun, and it is expensive to shoot. Yeah. 308's not as bad as some of the bigger rounds beyond it, but it's definitely more expensive than 5.56, 223
or
for
even
an
30,
AR.
30. Yeah.
Or even 30. Well, 30 is actually pretty.
Well, and
pretty
one of the
cheap.
things, we both have done a lot of research on it, and I was talking about ammunition for handguns and availability. You talk about rifle availability of ammunition. 30-30 is it's probably one of the most available ammunitions.
That was
in the US.
During the ammo shortages last year when we would go to the gun stores, mostly to fart around. That was one of the things we noticed, that there was always 30-30 on the shelf.
Right, and 30-30 is not that expensive for a 30 caliber rifle round.
It's pretty cheap.
Yeah, it's 40 cents to $1 a round, depending on the quality. But all of those are hunting rounds. They're all capable rounds. These aren't just practice at the range rounds. And like I said, it holds 6 rounds. Lever action is very quick to use. Speaking of it being a beast, the nice part about the 336 and the Winchester 94 is that they're very lightweight field rifles. You really can take those out into the woods, the field.
I think they weigh roughly 7 pounds, if I remember.
I think it's 6.5,
one is a
actually,
little bit heavier than the other, but they're in that 7-pound range, which is pretty light.
And the 30-30 is an extremely comfortable round to shoot. I think the 308 has somewhere, and don't correct me, I'm probably slightly off on this, but it's probably 15, 16 pounds of recoil, foot-pounds. The 30-30 is somewhere closer to 10 to 11. So, I mean, you could probably shoot a 30-30 all day long. Yeah. And it's also plenty of bullet take down most game. I mean, the 30-30 is the rifle that won the West. I mean, it's...
To go back to ARs and semi-automatic rifles in general, they're great and they're a lot of fun. I would still have picked a semi-auto rifle, and I would have picked the FAL. I don't know that I would have picked the AR. I actually do not. I like the one I have, but and this goes back to kind of why we were talking about. Not really kind of. I mean, it is the point of why we were talking about training first. Right. So that you understand what you're buying, and so that what you're buying matches the style you're using to shoot. And the AR really was designed for running and gunning military purposes. It was not That's not to say it can't be done, and I have used mine for this purpose, but it was not really designed for traditional rifle shooting.
And there are great, by the way, when Aaron said the AR, he was specific to the weapon, not the round.
Correct. Yeah, it had nothing to do with the round.
It's a fantastic varmint round. You put that in an accurate rifle, and you can take some really great shots.
And people do count as varmint.
Right, yes, they do. Yeah,
weight-wise.
Yeah, we're about that right size.
Yeah. So, but my thing was I just don't like the way the AR is set up for getting it. It doesn't operate or feel right in a traditional prone using a sling. For me, I mean, for you, it could be great. For me, I found it just doesn't the controls of the weapon are not conducive to traditional rifle shooting.
Right. That being said, I think, I mean, personally speaking, I love mine. I think it's a great rifle. It's fun to shoot. I mean, the 223 really is a fun round.
Mm-hmm.
But if I had to think in terms of that 4 weapon battery, I don't think the AR would have made it in if I only could do the 4.
And I think even in a lot of the recommendations, like even
Masad Ayub, he doesn't talk about the AR when he talks about his battery either. Now he loves his AR. I mean, he has spoken greatly about how much he likes ARs in general and the platform, and I do too. At some point I'll probably get a 9mm upper for mine just to really have fun at the range and be able to shoot it cheaper. I've even thought about putting a 22 upper on it, although I love my 10-22.
Mm-hmm.
But so it's a great platform. But again, it goes back to, would I put that in my 4? No. I think for rifles, I would think in terms personally of like the lever action, or if I were looking at some other weapon, I would probably be doing something like a bolt action rifle in terms of that 4.
And to kind of back up for a second, as far as using it for hunting, they all put a bullet out.
Yep.
And they all go bang.
Yep.
We can kind of put it that way. And there's nothing wrong with hunting with an AR, and a lot more people are starting to do it.
Oh yeah, and if you're in a situation where you need to,
then as long as it goes bang, it doesn't matter.
Like, yeah. But again, going back to that whole, I don't need the tactical. I mean, we talked a lot about tactical on the show.
Yeah.
I think we both had our phase. So if you're going through it, hey, I am not one to judge because been through.
Like we went through it bad.
He's got an AR and a FAL.
Yeah.
Okay, I've got the AR and a bunch of pistols that meet the black rifle concept, but in pistol form. So, I don't think either one of us would have anything to say to you if you were going through that phase.
No.
And there are plenty of tactical rifles that are also quality weapons.
It's not to diminish their weaponry. I just don't. I've really become irritated by tactical. And it's not to diminish anybody that is in that or anybody that really likes it. I just personally am like, I don't care what the weapon looks like. I don't care how badass it looks. Yeah. Just give me something that works.
And sometimes I think you end up paying a lot for that tactical when you can get a very beautiful weapon for a lot less sometimes than the tactical one that actually can outperform the tactical one to some extent.
Or, and there is,
function.
And I'm not even going to bother naming which one it is, but there is a manufacturer that makes one that is tactical looking, and then they make a hunting model. It is the exact same weapon. Yeah. The tactical is more expensive.
Oh, yeah, always, because they can. But I mean, in the rifle world, like I said, I'd focus on something you could hunt with.
And I would focus on a round that is plentiful in your area and applicable to your area.
Oh, yeah. So you do not, for instance, there is no reason. Again, this is something I happen to have. I have a 7mm Magnum. I love my Browning. It's a beautiful hunting rifle, and I can probably take out anything in North America at all. But in the area that we're in, it's overkill. It's a lot more than you need.
Yeah, you would actually damage the meat by using it.
So it's a lot more than I need. So something like a 30-30 or a 308 would be a lot more effective where we are, or at least a lot more economical or practical is probably the right word. But again, if you're up in the Northwest where there's grizzly,
or moose or any
elk,
of the bigger game animals,
and you're going to be shooting from a longer distance, then that flat trajectory, hard hitting round like a 7mm mag or a 300 Winchester mag or a 338 mag. All of those are fantastic. There's nothing wrong with those. And if you're up there, that's probably what you want to choose. If you're in the South, like where we are, and it's smaller game across the board, go for the smaller 30 cal rounds, something that you can find more easily down here. So just again, it's very regional. You're going to have to make those decisions based on where you are. Talk to hunters in your area. and actually talk to them, because you're going to get 50 different hunters are going to give you 75 different answers.
Yeah.
And that's if you're lucky.
Mm-hmm.
So talk to a lot of people. You're going to have to end up coming up with your own conclusions. But yeah, there's a lot to think about there. But again, get something practical. And this again goes back to don't go cheap here. So if you can, spread your money out pretty equally. You don't need the best handgun in the world or the best rifle in the world. You need one that will do the job, do it well, and be reliable. And you probably want both, or plus the shotgun, plus the 22.
Mm-hmm.
So, getting in a little bit to the shotgun world.
Well, I think let's go into 22 for a second, because we can make a cleaner segue with that, because since we are talking about a rifle.
Yep.
And this goes back to, I think, before you get your rifle, if you go to Appleseed and get instruction on a 22, that's a great place to ask especially what caliber to get regionally,
Mm-hmm.
what's going to suit you best, and what's available in your area, and you're going to get some people that Project Appleseed is a volunteer program, so the instructors are there because they really want to be there, and because they're passionate about teaching the history and rifle instruction, and so you're going to get guys that are very passionate about rifles.
Yeah,
so there is a great place to, you can get the very inexpensive Ruger or Marlin. I know there's a lot of people out there that really love the Marlin 22. I don't personally like it, but that's just personal preference. But that's a great place to get opinions about rifles.
Yeah. And the Ruger 1022 or Marlin or any of those lower cost 22s, I just read something that actually Savage makes a good one now, and so does...
Oh, do they really? I haven't been keeping up with it lately.
Who's the shotgun manufacturer? You have one.
Mossberg
actually makes a great pump action 22.
Oh, do they really?
Apparently, that is reliable and cheap and really good at what it does. So there's a lot of companies out there. Again, this goes back to get something you're comfortable with. We both endorse, I guess, the Ruger 1022. We think it's a great rifle.
Mm-hmm.
We've both gone from standard 1022s to crazy custom 1022s.
Well, and I think we can kind of tell another story on ourselves of where we started off with 22s.
That we accidentally stumbled into getting a great rifle.
We did, but I think to start off with, I would not recommend, because we spent, what was it? We spent about $650.
$650, and we did start out with something a little more custom.
Yeah.
Each of us got this. We got the same custom rifle to start. But you could start out with a base Ruger 1022. Go out to any of the Appleseed forums and figure out what a Liberty rifle is.
Yeah.
Start out with something like a Liberty rifle. You'll spend
$200.
$200 to $250. That's with everything.
That's with everything: the sling, the sights, everything.
So $200 to $250, and you walk away with everything. And that is probably where you want to start your firearms journey in general.
Mm-hmm.
Something like that. Then going out to an Appleseed and talking to those guys and learning how to use it. And when we talk about squeezing the trigger and sight alignment and trigger control, all of that will make a lot more sense for those of you who haven't done it by doing something like that. For our international shooters, I don't know where you should go, but if you do a little bit of research, there may be some groups.
And I think that is the answer. Since we're not in those areas, it's really hard. I mean, all we can do is do research on the internet, as we regularly make fun of.
But if you've got information to share with our other listeners, so if you are out there somewhere and we're outside the U.S. and you've got a recommendation, I know we've got a lot of Canadian listeners. We found out recently we have a whole bunch of UK listeners.
We do have a lot of UK listeners. And I think the best place is to get on the forum and start talking about it and create a community there.
Yep.
But the best place to get information in your area, I think almost every country that does allow guns in some shape or form has a gun club.
Right.
And the gun club may be expensive, but you probably can call up.
Yeah, and they'll talk to you.
And they'll probably talk to you because they're going to be people that are passionate about firearms.
People always like to share their passion with other
people.
Oh,
yeah.
Hell, we're here talking to you right now.
Exactly.
So but a good place to start is with good instruction again and getting something that you can grow into. One of the reasons we both happen to like the Ruger 1022 so much is that you can start with a base model at $250, and then the sky's the limit for where you want to adjust and customize. Don't do any adjustment and customizing until after you've done some training.
Mm-hmm.
Know what you want to change. I mean, you may find that the trigger is perfectly okay with you. You may find you hate the trigger. There are lots of trigger options out there. You may find the barrel is dead on accurate. Why change it? Things like that. You may find the stock fits you perfectly. You may find that you hate it. There's a lot of stock of options available. So again, this becomes one of those things where go out, shoot it, enjoy it, learn, and then make the adjustments as you go forward. And that way, it's also one of those expenses that you can incur over time rather than all at once.
Yeah, I definitely wish that, because while that rifle is great, I actually prefer my Liberty rifle better. And there's a lot of, I don't like using that. It's so light. Yeah. That because of it's got this big barrel shroud in the front of it, and it catches the wind. So shooting it offhand in wind is kind of a royal pain in the butt. Yeah. But, and I think that's one of those things. If I had gotten the training first, excuse me, Appleseed, it's instruction first. Right. I know we've got some Appleseeder listeners, so don't send me thing about instruction versus training. So, but going forward with the conversation, as far as I would have rather gotten that, because then I would have understood how I was going to use that rifle, and I would have known, that shroud is tactical awesome.
Right,
but
and it has its purpose.
It has its purpose,
You're going to attach a suppressor to the end of that rifle. The shroud makes it easier.
It makes it easier, and it makes it a legal limit. But but so, that's
all that aside. Again, that goes to a whole different set of discussions. Start with Liberty. I mean, I've built out now a pretty much end-to-end kid rifle. I think you have one too that's almost end-to-end at this point.
It is end-to-end, yeah.
So you can do that and spend over $1,000, but you end up with a tack driver of a 22. Yeah. You may find that the 1022 you bought from Walmart is a tack driver right out of the box.
Yeah, I've got one that is.
Yeah, and so I mean, it's possible, and they are out there. I mean, we've been to Appleseeds and we've seen guys pull these things almost out of the box for the first time, and
by the end of the weekend they're driving tacks with it.
Yeah, and it's less the rifle and more the shooter in that case. So again, it goes start with the 22. My recommendation is 22, handgun, rifle, shotgun. I know Aaron may swap. You can swap that out based on your needs too. You may find the shotgun makes more sense earlier on. But definitely go get that Appleseed instruction, which we push regularly.
Well, that's as far as the order of things. That's the only reason why I would suggest doing a 22 before a rifle.
Right.
Get that instruction. And that's the great thing, is that it's so inexpensive, and you get such wonderful instruction. So you learning on 22, and the skills are exactly the same transitioning to higher caliber rifles.
And if you've been a hunter for years, still go get a 22 and go to Appleseed.
Oh yeah.
You will find that your shooting improves. One of the things we've heard a lot of times is people say, well, I've been hunting for 30 years. Why do I need to? I know how to shoot. Yes, you probably do. There's always room for improvement.
Oh yeah.
The guys who are the best shooters in the world know that they can improve just that little bit more. So can the rest of us.
Yeah.
And so go do it. And if you are a hunter already, you have that hunting rifle. So that's one less thing you have to go get again. So go out and get the cheap 22, again, $250 for something like that. Yeah. It's worth it.
And I think since we brought up shotguns, moving, no, that's good. Moving on into shotguns, I think there's a lot, there's not as many options.
Right.
When you get into shotguns. And actually I take that back. There are just as many options. Maybe not as many calibers.
This goes back
to gauges.
I think, it's less calibers or gauges, but this becomes an area of myth too, where it's like, I have to have a 12 gauge.
Oh, yeah.
Well, if you're bird hunting and doing a lot of that, with a lot of the laws having changed from lead to steel, I don't know if there's anywhere where you can still use lead. There probably still are. So, but a lot of places have moved to steel only. That's where you can't really use a 20 gauge once you've done that, because the steel doesn't have the penetration. So you do want to use a 12. But in most situations, a 20 gauge, in the hands of most shooters who have problems with 12 gauges, that 20 will be just as effective, because, again, this goes back to if you're using a 44 mag and you can't control it, well, it's a useless gun. But same thing with a 12 gauge.
And in close, as far as using it for personal defense,
right,
in the ranges that you're going to use any shotgun for personal defense, and in the ranges that are the normal, reasonable ranges, where, anything more than a certain distance, and you're not really doing self-defense anymore, which is kind of a topic we're not really going to get into, but in a home defense, unless you live in the Bill Gates mansion and you've got a 100-yard room, and I don't even know that he does, but I mean, I'm making crap up, but just to illustrate the point. But the shotgun, the 20 versus the 12 in those ranges is not going to make a difference.
Exactly. So this is not who has the bigger gauge,
Yes.
or smaller gauge in this particular case.
Mhm.
But this isn't about what makes you more manly. Actually, most trick shooters, the guys who do all that shotgun cool trick shooting you'll see on TV, I know the History Channel loves to show those guys doing
Yeah.
things. Most of those guys are using 20 gauge. So, because again, it's easier to control, even for those guys who are regular shooters. It's just if you're trying to hit something quickly and regain your sight picture fast, that the higher gauge, or the 20 gauge versus the 12, it's going to be a lot easier with the 20 than it will be the 12.
Yeah, and that's, I think, that is kind of the expression. If you're good with the 12, you'll be amazing with the 20.
Right.
And if you're terrible with the 12, you'll be good with the 20.
Yeah.
And that's not to knock the 12. I mean, I have a 12 gauge shotgun for home defense, but it is the shotgun I've had since I was 18 years old.
Yep.
And I have no real reason to go buy a new shotgun. And I've taken my girlfriend to the range and have actually seen that she is able to handle the 12 gauge perfectly fine. So we're back to, there's no reason for us to get another. But if you're getting your first one, I would honestly go with a 20 over 12.
Yeah,
if you're not going to use it for hunting,
right.
if you're not really going to use it for anything other than home defense, 20 gauge is perfectly fine. And that's the thing. If you're getting into hunting, well, then you're going to have all kinds of different needs than the person that is using it for home defense, because now you've got to talk about chokes. Now you've got to really talk about chokes. You've got to talk about barrel length. You've got to talk about, do you need a 20? Do you need a 12? Do you need a 10 gauge? Or, are you out there hunting turkeys?
Right.
What is the animal you're hunting?
It goes back to that use model. What are you going to use it for? And then also, even in addition to that, you want to think about use model when it comes to, you want a over-under?
Mm-hmm.
Do you want a pump action? Do you want semi-auto? All those things will be determined partly by where you are. So for our friends who are overseas in less gun-friendly countries, sometimes it's easier to get a over-under shotgun than it would be to get a semi-auto.
Mm-hmm.
It actually may be impossible to get a semi-auto. I don't know. But when you have to think about where you are, that might impact it and what you're going to use it for. And again, for all these things, because you are kind of thinking in terms of what would be my 4, make sure it's multi-purpose. You don't want something that is a tool that is so scalpel specific that it's not useful for other things. So
unless you are a competitive shooter, and that scalpel specific tool meets that competitive.
But then
that's different.
In my mind, then you've still got your base 4,
right?
And then you've got the competition gun to add as a 5th.
Yeah.
And to me, that's the way to kind of look at this. If you have to think about what your base is, think about it in terms of that base, and it's a defensive handgun, a good shotgun, a good rifle, a good 22, and you've got most of your bases covered in any preparedness situation, any survival situation that you might need, you're covered.
Yeah. The only thing I would get into as far as talking about survival is if your concern is a long-term breakdown of society. I mean, this is a survival show, so we can definitely bring up this topic. Pump action versus semi-auto versus break action.
Yep.
The break action is going to be the absolute most reliable. It's stupid, easy, probably nothing on it is ever going to break. Right. And then after that, we get into pump action. You can clear jams much more easily, much more quickly. You may not be able to pump off as many rounds as quickly as you could. Now, there are guys that can, but without a lot of practice, you can pump out more rounds more quickly with a semi-auto. But that goes back to accuracy. The rhinoceros doesn't care how many bullets are whizzing past its head. It only cares about the one that hits it in the head. So how many rounds you're able to pump out of it, how quickly, is not that important. Right. With a little bit of practice, you can get perfectly, and plenty of speed, I guess is the point, with a pump action versus a semi-auto. Yep. But they are a little more reliable, but it's almost splitting hairs. But that's only in the cases where we're really talking about long-term shit hit the fan breakdowns of society.
Yeah. That's unlikely scenarios like that. But in the broader sense, having a skill in these 4 types of firearms is good to have. I mean, it goes back to that skills building. If you can master these 4 types of firearms, then really in any scenario where you might need a firearm, you'll be covered. And that's the beauty of having a list like this where it's like, okay, so what if you do end up, it's an urban show, but what if you did end up in a rural area where you needed to be able to hunt for food? Could you? Well, if you have some rifle skills, then the answer is probably yes, you could. Now, there's other skills you would need in order to make that useful. Like you have to know how to clean the animal and prepare it and everything else. But those are things, again, other skills to learn. This show is dedicated to the firearms of the world and our love of them. And then just one other thing to kind of add to this. I've been joking around a lot throughout the show of, don't email me if. Email me, go ahead. I mean, I love receiving your emails. Send us as many as possible. Don't take that as we don't want to get emails. It was really just like, on that particular topic, don't email me, but on anything else, feel free.
So to kind of wrap up the show, just to run through really quickly and close out the points that we've been making, which is get the instruction first, then buy the firearm that's right for you. Don't worry about tactical unless you already have guns and it is something that you really, really want, which we do totally understand. We have plenty of guns that were just, I just want it.
Personal preference issue, it's always there.
Yeah. And find the caliber that's right for you. Again, nothing feels good to get shot by.
Yeah. For you and your location. And that's whether it be your handgun, your shotgun, your rifle, or your 22. Obviously, 22, you don't have to worry about caliber. It is what it is.
Yeah.
With the other ones, find the appropriate caliber and style for what you want to do with it in the region you're in.
Yeah. So the point I was making, though, about nothing feels, that is more of a self-defense thing. Right. Now, when we're talking about hunting, there are ethical reasons to make sure you are using the correct caliber, because there are a variety of animals. And
it's more than just caliber at that point. There's bullet choice and a lot of things. That's why we go back to talk to the local hunters, understand what's going on. Basically, it's all about get your education in whatever you want to do, and understand that the 4 things you want in your battery: handgun, shotgun, rifle, and 22.
Absolutely. And with that, we wrap up episode 54. Thank you for joining us. If you liked the podcast, make sure to leave us a review in iTunes. It helps others find us. And if you didn't, well, why not tell us about it using the contact form on the site? Seriously. The show's for you, the listener, and if you have something to say, we're listening. Be sure to connect with us through Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and the Urban Survival Forum through the links on the top right-hand side of the site at www.intherabbithole.com. Also, don't forget to sign up for the newsletter. By connecting with us, you'll receive updates about the site, notifications of new articles, and podcast episodes. That's right, we're not just a podcast. Every week, articles are posted to the site that cover all manner of topics relating to surviving in an urban environment, whether in good times or in extreme circumstances. Show notes are posted with each episode where we invite you to comment on the show, interact with us, interact with each other, and let the world know what you're thinking. From the Lone Star State, till next time, stay safe and sound.